I hope that people have been saving their questions. Here's an opportunity. We don't often have a chance to have 4 people of this stature and reputation together in one room.
Easy now, Mike.
It's kind of scary.
Build us up.
So if you have a question you'd like to pose to any one of the panel members, we're going to have microphones set up. I guess Kevin is roving with one there. So,
And I have one too.
oh, and Warren has one. Do you have a question, Warren?
I thought on behalf of all the shy people in the room, I would start things off.
I can't hear you.
I've got a green light. Hey, tech guy. Oh, it's on. I heard it. Whenever you did it, oh.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank the presenters for a long and winding trip down memory lane with decades of people and places and battles won and lost. I thought I would share with you the fact that I helped prepare for the conference by reading corporate press releases and the Northern Miner.
You're evil.
I like to know what's going on. And so what I have seen, particularly from Canadian companies, is the acronym ESG, representing environmental and social governance. And I haven't heard that around here. I have wondered how we could get people to talk about it. And even though you didn't collectively use that acronym or those words, I think we had an excellent demonstration from you collectively about environmental and social governance. And now I don't have to worry about it anymore. I appreciate it. I think your various presentations touched on the environment, the relation with the environment, regulations, and I certainly heard a lot about social works, good works that the companies are doing. So thank you for covering that. Just a comment for Mark in particular. I can't tell you what a warm, fuzzy feeling it gave me to see that MR's bond was over 100 million. And that made me think of our past battles, because I don't think there is a single topic which has been quite as contentious or acrimonious as our 5-year bond reviews, where we would come to the company and present a vastly larger number. I don't say it was you, maybe it was some of your predecessors, but it was a lot like just beating our heads against a brick wall, trying to get companies to agree to large upward leaps. In fact, I remember a lawyer for MR, who shall remain nameless, who, when presented with a large upward leap in the bond, said, "This bond is the iceberg and MR is the Titanic." But we managed to work our way through that without having to launch any lifeboats. No one was killed, and everything is fine now. So thank you for that. Only one other comment, just for Doug, as you were talking about the tens of millions of ounces of silver, hundreds of millions of pounds of copper. I was just reflecting on the fact that all of that mineral came out of ore that basically looked like white beach sand with a few dark specks in it. It was hardly what you would expect from ore, and yet it kept the mining operation going for a very long time. And in the fullness of time, maybe more of it will bring Montanore and Rock Creek back to life. I yield the microphone. Ken and I will run it around if there's any.
Would any of you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Warren.
So I recognize that all of your sites are in slightly different scenarios, but I'd like you to maybe predict what the next 30 years look like. Instead of looking backwards, let's look forward.
The next 30 years.
I guess I'll take the first shot. So, I mean, what we're experiencing now, I would say over the last 2 or 3 years is obviously the big push towards automation, technology, and systems. So I think to Warren's point with ESG, it really drives a lot of the systems side of the business in terms of reporting and verification, those kind of things. But yeah, I think Chuck maybe touched on the autonomous vehicles, battery-powered equipment, the technology side. I mean, it's hard to change mining that has been going on for 100 years, you know, but even at the faces, you know, if, you know, we're looking at different explosive types, you know, different technology there, trying to get away from, you know, traditional, you know, ANFO or emulsion or explosives. So, I mean, it's just happening so fast, right? There's just a lot of areas.
Well, I gotta agree with Randy on that. Montana Resources right now is investing very heavily into the automated CAT software, vehicle tracking, dispatch systems, efficiencies. And, you know, when you look at the, you know, price of diesel right now and where it's going, you know, those trucks and efficiencies are gonna be big. Tailings impoundment is gonna be a critical feature at MR as it always has been. You know, I think from the mill processing, you know, the technology that's emerging right now is just going to be phenomenal into the future. So, you know, I tend to agree with Randy. Technology. I also think a lot of these third-party certifications, the IRMA, the International Tailings Standard, a lot of that is going to be playing into the social license to operate, and people are going to want to see more than maybe just what we say we're good at. So.
Yeah, I guess I would echo that. I mean, I think from a innovation perspective, it seems like mining has been a bit late to kind of the innovation party, if you will. But you know, I think in addition to the autonomous equipment, and we're looking at also other ways to Randy's point, especially at an underground mine, keep people safe, keep people out of the working areas as much as possible, which leads to autonomous equipment, remote operated equipment. I also think moving towards electric or alternatively powered mining equipment, I see that a lot. I think within the next 30 years, especially in an underground mine where, you know, you're going deeper, the easy stuff is gone. So to continue to mine, it's harder, it's more technically challenging. And in order to do that, it's going to take some different approaches. So I think non-diesel powered equipment underground, I think the ESG space will continue to evolve. I think you know, the mining moving forward, and you know, I think you're seeing it today, is more, you know, it has to benefit more than just a few key stakeholders. There has to be, you know, stakeholder consideration and benefit for as many stakeholders as you can identify. And it's it'll get harder, but I think, you know, with innovation and the right mindset, we will continue to mine, and I think it just will continue to evolve.
You're welcome to ask each other questions too.
Hey Chuck, what do you have for dinner? Oh, that's not like that.
I'm curious if any of you are seeing a corporate interest in focusing on more low-risk deposits. By that I mean ones like Hecla has up in western Montana, or like Stillwater has, where the waste rock and tailings is less acid generating.
I don't think there's any such thing as a low risk deposit, for starters.
Sorry, what was that? What was that?
I don't think there's any such thing as a low risk deposit.
I mean, from a standpoint of water quality, and
I think, you know, that becomes part of, I guess in my view, that becomes part of the overall equation that goes into the assessment of whether or not you've got something that's a mine or not. Obviously, clean deposits, clean ore bodies, good geochemistry is a kind of a foundational component of your decision-making process, but it's not the only component of your decision-making process. So I mean, those are good things to have. If you can start with good geochemistry, then a lot of problems maybe don't materialize, but there are still issues that you must identify and overcome. So, and the easy stuff is gone, and it's only the deposits that are left, especially in lower risk, I would say jurisdictions are harder and harder to, and more expensive to get to and develop.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You really factor in risk into your project life cycle cost estimate, where you take it from initial capital and even permitting and exploration all the way through closure, and then you look at, you know, is that number black or red? Obviously, lower closure and long-term care and maintenance issues are going to push you towards a black number instead of a red number. But having said that, we also have to understand that the demands of society are going to increase exponentially particularly as we make this transition from fossil fuels to renewables. And those new minerals, those new metals, they all have to be mined. So what we'll see is an escalating price, and then that makes red numbers black again. So I don't know, I think everybody would like a low risk opportunity, but I think at the end of the day, to satisfy the marketplace, there's going to be higher risks taken. We just got to be smarter on how we address the risks.
I guess that what I was thinking about was Crown Butte New World, which I was involved in the permitting of that, and now Tintina, with you're dealing with massive sulfides. It seems like there's an element of the public that really want zero risk when it comes to water quality, and so those projects really have a harder time than maybe yours where you're dealing with nitrates or, yeah.
They're all going to have a hard time. I mean, really, it's
Yeah.
But again, I think it just bakes into the risk profile, and you have to put that into the economic assessment and include mitigation measures for those risks you identify, and that generally will translate either into a social license issue or a financial issue that you just need to roll into your analysis.
I have a quick question on the timeline. How is it that that Hecla came to buy a non-economically viable mine? I'm not familiar, so.
Oh, okay. When we acquired Troy, it came with the Rock Creek project. So we acquired Revette, which included the Troy mine, and the Rock Creek project, which is what we were acquiring, was really that project. And there was another component. I was talking to someone out there, and this was all in financial documents a while ago. But with Troy, there was a reclamation insurance policy that came with it, which covered a vast majority of the reclamation costs. So, you know, you kind of factor all that into, again, the financial decision as to whether or not, and what the price you pay really dictates whether or not you're gonna make the deal. But for this one, it was getting the Rock Creek project was the reason for the acquisition.
Yeah, first to comment, I agree that there's no such thing as a low-risk mine. You can find undiscovered gold pluton in Jordan, Montana, and someone would say, isn't that 200 miles from the Smith River? Anyway, my question is, I work on Superfund sites, and currently work on the Hecla smelter. And there, the Atlantic Bridgewood Company's been spending a good deal of resources trying to bring in people to reuse the land. First, they looked at wind, and now they're looking seriously at putting solar farm on top of their tailings impoundments that's 3,500 acres long. You guys all have significant imprints. You Doug, you mentioned about your wind on your tailings impoundment. Have you evaluated those kind of alternative energies?
I would say for us specifically, I mean, it's windy, but not all the time. And that's what, so when you're looking at a wind project, you want consistent wind. We don't have consistent wind. We have a very episodic, but when it blows, it can blow pretty hard, but not all the time. Similar with solar, Northwest Montana, you don't see a lot of sun. But I know other projects that I'm familiar with in Nevada, really, that is an area, and that being solar or alternative energy on closed mine sites is something that I think a lot of companies are looking at. I've also seen some proposals where you would have floating solar panels covering your ponds. So, which, especially in areas that where water's a scarcity, prevent evaporation, keep birds off your pond, and generate electricity. So I've seen kind of movement in that area, kind of reutilization of mine sites for various needs, and some operating sites. But it really is site specific. It just has to work for the site and for whatever you're thinking about.
I know, and locally, there's an outfit that rents from our business park right below the mine. And what their technology is a little bit different, where when it's windy, it's generating power, and then they compress some of that air, we'll say, into a big tank underground or whatever, so that when it's not windy, it's releasing air and running the turbine also. So they want to test it. We're going to let them play around on our property to see if they can make something work. And obviously, when you're in closure, you're trying to cut your costs as much as you can. And I think I would be surprised if not everybody in this room at their locations have to look at alternative energy in some form or another for that particular purpose too, because if you have water treatment, you're going to have to power something in some fashion.
Yeah, I think I'd echo the comments. I mean, what we've seen at our mine sites, especially being in, these mountain valleys, is the winds are so episodic that it's really tough. I mean, we're designing for 120 mile an hour wind gusts up at Stillwater, and, that's just too high. And then with solar, the amount of sunlight hours in these valleys, you might get 4 or 5 hours a day. It's just tough to pencil it out. I will tell you, at our smelter in Columbus, we do have solar panels that powers a portion of our facilities, and we're looking at expanding that as well.
Yeah, it seems that, I'm actually talking with a guy right now, he's in England, I believe, who wants to float some solar panels on the Berkeley pit and keep the birds from landing on it. And basically what we're seeing, even without the issues of trying to float something on the Berkeley pit, is without subsidies, you can't justify it. It doesn't pencil out. And so what you look for is synergies. And I mean, I think the birds on the Berkeley pit's a perfect example. The other proposal that we've looked at here recently was covering the tailings impoundment with solar panels to reduce the potential for dust off the tailings impoundment. So none of them are looking very favorable right now, but that's what you need. You either need subsidies or you need synergies at this point in time. But hopefully technology advances and a lot of this can change. Well, that hydropower you got up there at Zortman.
Yeah, I'll agree with Mark's comments there. We did receive one wind turbine from a gift from the BLM, Zortman, and we used it for a while. But we learned, first of all, that the wind is not constant in its direction, it shifts frequently, and that's generally not good for wind power production. And also, we're not in the wind power business up there. We have to hire more staff to operate that. The maintenance costs for one turbine just ate us alive, so you really have to have a wind farm and not just one. We learned pretty quickly. So if anyone's interested in buying a used wind turbine.
Kevin, is there a question over there?
So several of you have touched on the kind of like the aging workforce and the institutional knowledge. One, I guess, couple part question. One, has that transition started to transfer that knowledge? And then two, do you see an issue in the future with hiring enough people that can move these operations forward because it is such a specialized industry?
Well, I can tell you Chuck doesn't have that problem because he keeps stealing our guys.
Still treat you very well.
Yeah, no, that's a serious problem. As particularly the skilled trades they're not coming up from the bottom like they used to. And I mean, you used to be able to hire an electrician or a diesel mechanic right off the street fairly easily. It wasn't a big deal. They just don't exist anymore. So, you know, we're trying to institute programs internally, you know, to mentor and essentially apprenticeships for electricians and diesel mechanics. We're trying to put incentivize younger people to go to trade schools. You know, we're paying their tuitions, buying their tools, that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, you can't guarantee they're going to come work for you, even after you do that. So, I mean, there's a bit of a risk involved in doing things like that. But yeah, there is definitely a problem with the newer, younger people coming into the workforce right now that needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, we're integrated pretty well where we do have you know, quite a few well-experienced employees that are able to mentor younger ones, so that helps quite a bit. So.
Yeah, it's an issue today. It really is. I mean, I'll just echo Mark's comments. I mean, the whole workforce issue, one, finding people, and then, you know, housing, finding places where people can live and those kind of things. You know, similar to resources, you know, we have internal apprenticeship programs, and, you know, we get it to the high schools and try to encourage people, show them what opportunities exist out there, that maybe college, you know, traditional four-year college isn't for everybody, and that there are other opportunities, high-paying jobs, that they can live close to home. But, you know, for us, you know, we have an attrition rate around 10%, which is actually pretty good. But when you have 2,000 employees, you're trying to hire 200 people every year. And it's a challenge just to replace people that attrit, you know, and housing and all the issues that we're experiencing now. So it's a challenge. As far as the institutional knowledge, I think that's something we've been recognizing as well, and it's really kind of guiding some of our systems approaches in terms of, it's new, so a lot of the information doesn't live in people's heads. You know, we're trying to get it down into a system or on paper, part of the technology side that, you know, it's not so dependent on people as much as it is the system.
Yeah, I want to echo too. You know, first of all, your question is super spot on, not just for institutional knowledge, which again, we don't have a lot of folks, but the ones that we do have are getting bothered. I won't say bothered, but they can't hardly do their jobs because they're spending more time trying to address somebody else's questions about, you know, where does this particular flow go, or that particular pump, and that kind of stuff. We've hired a lot of new folks. Again, you gotta go wherever you can, people that have that kind of experience, but I think the ones that we took from Mark actually worked at our place before anyway. Yeah. They kind of liked us.
We might have got them from you.
But you know, we're obviously not doing something right in the industry, and I don't know if that's education or training or how we grow our people, because we had a lot of jobs that pay, in my opinion, pretty well. I mean, for this area, we paid pretty good. And you think we could get, you know, a 22-year-old person? Makes any difference? I don't think we got but maybe one application out of 40 that were somebody less than 30 years old. And the folks that actually that we ended up hiring were the ones that had a bit of experience, but we ended up actually probably not even helping our attrition rate. We probably brought in more people that were pushing 45 or 50. We just couldn't find the younger folks. So obviously that's got to, we got to start somewhere. We got to start understanding, you know, what it is that the young folks, you know, I got two boys that are right there. They like techie stuff. They like more computer things. You know, working with their hands, maybe not working with their backs as much. I don't know, but it's good work. It's taken care of my family, you know, for a lot of years. But can't seem to get that generation to think the same way. I guess we were brought up.
Well, I'll echo the same thing that they're saying, even though my project's a little different. So at Zortman-Landusky, I have a staff of 7 who are water treatment plant operators, heavy equipment operator, heavy equipment mechanic, electrician, and I've, out of those 7, 1 is fairly new to the project, and the other 6 have been on my staff for about 23 years now, and we're working for Pegasus for 10 to 20 years before that. The one replacement guy we hired is also a local who's in his 60s, so we haven't hired anyone young out there, and at some point, these people are going to retire. And you know, it's remote central Montana, and so you know, basically we retained the people who had worked up there for many years, who had the best skills and were the most dedicated. And it's going to be challenging to bring in new people to continue this, and at the same time, we're trying to continually improve automation of the treatment system, so they require less hands-on work, but we'll always need somebody out there.
I would add the, you know, discussion about skilled labor, but look at the enrollment at Montana Tech right now. Look at how many people are in the mining engineering department who are in the metallurgy department. It's there's not many people interested in even becoming professionals in the mining industry anymore, and that's going to be a huge problem.
Question back there.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you gentlemen for coming up and talking with us today. I had a question kind of carries on from what was just discussed there. And the governor talked this morning about some of the challenges with hiring on and getting the new generation moved in there.
Do you have a question?
One thing I haven't heard happen yet is, talking about the military and trying to get a hold of our veterans that are coming out of the military with, electricians, heavy equipment operators, plumbers. And if that's something that your industry has really tried to tap into, to try to get through coordination with the VA with, the Boots on Hard Hats program and stuff like that, to try to get some of these veterans that are, they're coming shovel ready, more or less, out of the military and are, but, looking for good paying jobs to continue on, after their military career.
Was there a question over here?
Can I just quickly, Mike, I guess, to respond, I don't know if it's as much a comment as it was a question. I mean, I think it's a very good observation. I guess I can't personally speak to our recruiting department, so I'm not sure they're looking at that too much, but I'll certainly pass it on.
My question is for Randy. In your talk, you had mentioned something called I believe it was the Independent Tailings Review Board. Can you speak more to that? Who's on it? What their responsibilities are, things like that?
Yeah, I'm going to actually defer that to our expert in the back of the room there, Matt Wolf. He kind of coordinates that for the company, so.
Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, you owe me so.
So if you're familiar with Montana statute, there's an IRP, independent review panel required. for newer expanded tailings facilities in Montana. And we established that IRP back in 2015 when that statute came to be. And so we have three tailings professionals. Two of them are geotech engineers that have been in the industry for 40 plus years. Anyway, there's a panel of three. Now, recently, there's something called the Global Tailings Standard, or Global Industry Standard for Tailings Management. And our company is part of a group of companies called ICMM, International Council on Mining and Metals. And ICMM has committed to, all the ICMM members have committed to be in conformance with that global tailings standard by next year. And that global tailings standard requires a similar panel called the ITRB, Independent Tailings Review Board. So that independent review panel that we established back in 2015 is also going to be our ITRB for our current operating facilities. It's a little confusing, but the IRP by statute is reviewing our new or expanded facilities, and the ITRB that's required by the Global Tailings Standard is reviewing all of our facilities, including the current operations. So we have three individuals on the review board. Dirk Van Ziel, I'm sure most of you are familiar with him. He's given talks here at the conference before. We have Richard Dawson, who's with Stantec. We have Matt Fuller, who's with Tierra Group in Denver. And those are the three members of our board. Did that answer your question?
Yes. What are the responsibilities of that board? Do they go out and do inspections?
So their responsibility is to be familiar with the design, the operations of our tailings facilities. You know, from the Montana statute, their responsibility is to review in detail the design and approve that design. But for the operating facilities, you know, we have an internal requirements for the ITRB, and that the ITRB reviews and approves things like our OMS manual, our emergency preparedness plan, and then also gets their feet on the ground at our facilities. I believe it's once every 2 years. So they do review and audit our facilities on the ground.
Okay, thank you.
I guess just speaking of tailings, has there been any interest in looking into reprocessing tailings or like rare earth elements?
Yeah, not so much for rare earths, but I mean, as a company, we're certainly looking at reprocessing opportunities with some of our older tails. You know, basically 30 years ago, you know, we just weren't seeing recoveries that we're seeing today. So we know there's value in metal. It just has to pencil out, you know, for moving that much material. So, and you know, for us, I think, you know, we were looking at the Nyan comment, which is, you know, can we, in the reprocessing, can we actually move it to a better location where maybe it doesn't present as much risk to the environment? So it's definitely being looked at and thought about, so, for us.
Randy, on that subject of recycling, I was wondering whether or not you're looking, or if any of the rest of you are looking at advancing that, expanding reprocessing to other opportunities beyond catalytic converters. I mean, are there other potential sources that?
Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to the furnace for us. It's interesting, you know, what, we have looked at some oil catalysts, you know, that oil refineries, and but you gotta be careful, you know, you don't have runouts in your furnace, so you gotta be careful how much carbon and those kind of things are in those products. So yeah, there's a lot of metallurgy involved there, but we're always looking for opportunities to do that. You know, just in terms of the recycle or reprocessing of tails, I mean, this is kind of becoming a global industry. You know, and just as a company last year, we actually bought into a company out of Australia that's reprocessing a lot of their old tailings impoundments down in Australia. As a company, we're also doing that in South Africa. So, I mean, it's becoming a big business to reprocess tails. So, and maybe to the point, you know, where some of the metals we were just overlooking 30 years ago now have value, you know, and they're sitting in the tailings impoundments. So, yeah, it's a business.
Yeah, along those lines, I found out this morning that there is actually something that I agree with the governor of Montana on, and that is that Chuck, you and Golden Sunlight have a terrific project there with your reprocessing. And I know there are more projects like that out there. I believe Rio Tinto probably has at least 3 of them, including putting in a recovery circuit to recover I think it's either scandium or niobium from tails in eastern Canada. I think they're doing something at their Utah smelter. And I know there are projects like that out there, and I'd very much like to hear more about them if any of you have some suggestions. Sidney Smith from AEMA is still here. I'd like to talk to him. But I think that this is a fascinating growth area, and we'd like to hear more about it here at next year's conference. So if any of you have any ideas, please share them.
And we haven't necessarily looked at tailings reprocessing, but other waste streams, particularly our impacted waters, like in the Berkeley pit, are fairly rich in rare earths and cobalt. So we're looking at that. I see there's a talk tomorrow where Montana Tech is working with the Army on this, and we're hoping to be part of that project. But if anybody has any idea for tailings, I got 1 billion tons.
On the topic of reprocessing, how much do you think the effort could be helped if we had a good Samaritan bill passed? Are you familiar with the laws that are being considered for there, and do you think that would help? You're shaking your head no.
Well, I mean, it's got to be there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in economic, I think it completely is a site-specific issue, and again, it's driven by the ore body that you're in, and if rare earths aren't there, they're not there. You're just not going to get them. So I think it's more really, quite frankly, driven by what's in the tails, and if there's an economic way to extract it, and then if that extraction also results in an overall closure benefit, I think that gets weighed into the decision as well. But I think mining companies are looking at various ways to maximize the use of their the product they have, and part of the feed is that ore, and if there's a way to get more of what's there out that makes sense, that is economic, I think there's probably a lot of creative folks out there thinking about it, and we'll do it if it works, if it makes sense.
Without a good Samaritan law.
Yes, but yeah, I mean, I think that might apply, Mike, in situations where you have historic tails that are in a potential Superfund situation or on public lands. But I think it's really a site-specific question, and if the material is there in quantities that could economically be extracted, I think the conversations might be a little bit different with Good Samaritan, but I just don't know if that would totally drive it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to drive the issue, but we've got a couple of examples in Butte where we're taking Superfund waste and essentially using our mine as a repository for those wastes. And yeah, you do worry about it. You worry about what that implication can be. And I know Chuck at Golden Sunlight has, taken offside ores. And that was, when I was there, that was happening. That was a concern.
That was from up at Cook City, wasn't it? You're talking about the Cook City tailings?
No, we ended up not getting those tailings. They ended up doing an on-site repository for those, but like the Mammoth tailings, and I can't remember how many tons came out of that, but you worry about these types of things. Can they, even though it's a cleanup activity, it's a revenue generating activity, it's overall a benefit to everyone involved, including the public, but it could come back and bite you. And so I know in the past, there's been operations that have refused to do that right thing because, let's face it, lawyers got involved. But have not done those types of things because there isn't a Good Samaritan law. And while we can do something at the state level in Montana for a Good Samaritan law, it doesn't cover you from the federal risks. So I think that's a noble pursuit for someone like AEMA to continue to push that. I know they've been working on that for some time.
Yeah, he had it on his list in his presentation this morning. Other questions?
This is going back to the trade schools. So in a former career, I worked in early childhood education for several years. And one of the biggest improvements, I guess, for getting kids into college was to intervene before 5th grade. And I imagine that whether you're talking about a 4-year college or a trade school, the younger you start putting an idea into a kid's head that like they can see themselves in that position, the better, the more likely they are to pursue that path. I grew up in Wisconsin, so I didn't go to school here, and I don't know what the dialogue is here, and I might be off base. But in Wisconsin, I grew up in a farming community, and the dialogue that I remember growing up was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was very like white collar centric, doctor, lawyer, teacher, etc. And I don't know that it was like conscious, but there wasn't really ever an emphasis from teachers on like, oh, you could be a plumber or you could do this. It was very focused in one direction. And so when I worked in early childhood education, I made a very, I intentionally would throw other trades and other education or like other careers into kids to just kind of not just steer them onto this one career path. And so this is really more of like a food for thought and a comment as we've discussed today, like community engagement and intervention. I'm imagining that there's, community days or like people mentioned field trips with kids. But I guess I would encourage everybody to just think about in Montana, like how those discussions go with kids and ways that we can start from like a young age to help kids see themselves in those positions. And that's like discussions at home and at school and even things like science museums where you're like, what are the displays and whatnot. So that's just my comment and yeah, food for thought on how to address it. It really starts young, I'm sure some of you know, but I've heard a lot of discussion on how to like reach out to high schoolers, and I would encourage maybe think about even younger and just how we talk to kids in ways that don't even seem that intentional, but we might be shaping their minds from a pretty young age.
Excellent comment. Another question over here.
Hi, wanted to get your thoughts on what approaches are companies taking to identify possible other economic elements in the unmined or at a mine site that they haven't previously recognized, whether it's rare earths or something else. Are you looking at other things and how and what's happening there?
So in the company I work for, Barrick, I'm in the closure group because really what we're looking at right now is it's an alternative to closure, cleaning up the tailings. Ours was kind of I won't say it's a slam dunk, but there's been a discussion about this since probably when Mark got hired on with Barrick back in '07. They were talking about reprocessing the tailings and sending them out as a fuel source. I mean, that's what the sulfur is going to be used for. But you know, as time progressed and our project became much more mature, it obviously became a topic within the group. And there's about 30 other mines that this company has to deal with that are closed or going into closure. So the aspect is just do the full gamut on geochemistry, whether it's on your waste rock or even in your tailings impoundments, just to understand at what concentrations do you have whatever they are, minerals, metals, and so forth. And there's been a few other areas like in some in Canada and other places that definitely have value, whether they're cobalt or rare earth metals or so forth. And now the question becomes is you know, who's your customers? You got to market, you know, what you have and so forth. So that's that direction, you know, that part of the company is going down. And I think the other part that you know, I think most companies are spending a lot more time on is actually planning for closure even during the design of the mine. And you know, I remember growing up here in this conference, you know, for the last 30 years, and I always assumed that that's exactly what it was, is that I always called it the Mine Design Closure Conference, you know, and it was like, we're designing a mine for closure. But, you know, that seemed like some of the case studies that we were talking about, but here, you know, I think in reality, that's, you know, it's probably, you know, a lot of the case studies are about design and about closure and about operations. But at the end of the day, I think we're going, or we need to go in that direction where you start to develop your mind thinking about what are you going to have when you're done.
Yeah, I think it's probably, you know, just something that, you know, as you're assessing an ore body and, you know, you're running the geochemistry, or you're looking generally at everything just to get a sense for what's there. And, you know, a lot of times geologists really understand what the genesis of the ore body is, what resulted in the mineralization and what potentially could be there. And you know, a lot of times you don't get everything in one ore body, right? And sometimes you just wouldn't expect certain elements, and you know, you run a full scan and you find them, but generally you just don't find them. But I would say that the mining companies that I've been involved with have always been interested in you know, making as much as they could from the ore that they had. But I've seen a few cases where they've, you know, some additional testing has yielded some interesting results as far as other elements that could potentially make some money. But you don't find it a lot. You know, at least from my experience, I haven't seen a lot of surprises as far as something good that's there that you can recover. But you know, I think you can pretty easily assess whether or not it's even there.
Oh, question here, Justin.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your time, gentlemen. For your companies, obviously you have different projects and stuff, but have you seen any uptick in inside exploration, or are you guys still just waiting for the juniors to de-risk assets before you purchase them?
Yeah, I can speak to our company a little bit. I mean, we have, right now, we have 3 joint ventures, but we really kind of spin those off. So before the merger with Sibanye, we had Marathon, we had Altar, kind of some exploration projects, but as a company now, Sibanye Stillwater is really not in that business. And so we've basically formed different kinds of JVs and let some of these juniors take these projects on and see what's there.
I'm not in the exploration group, so I don't have a good sense for that, but I do know, you know, the exploration folks. I do know, and we do a lot of exploration ourselves as well. I mean, we've got drills turning on several different projects, and so I know, you know, we as a company do a lot of exploration ourselves and always have our eyes open for other opportunities that, you know, whether it's a junior or another operating company. But, you know, I would say it's a combination, but it depends on the company. But I know we've got a lot of drills turning in various places.
What was the new type of explosive?
Well, we've been looking at different mixes, emulsions, as opposed to ANFO. But really looking at more cutters, you know, road headers, you know, something that can go in and physically cut the rock. But haven't had a lot of success. You know, they haven't, over at the Lucky Friday, they've been doing some different work with road headers and that kind of stuff. But we're just watching, hopefully there's a laser someday.
I think we're going to have to end it here. Thank you, gentlemen. Very interesting panel discussion.